Shalom Aleichem, my dear brothers and sisters. Somebody asked me to do like a little tour of the library that you sometimes see in my videos behind me, of what books, and I just want to talk a little bit about some of the books, maybe, so that some of you guys are aware of what is out there, for English-speaking people and what they can learn about Judaism from which books. So I'm going to, do a little tour. So let's start maybe with this set over here. So this is what we call the Chumash. The Chumash is the 5 books of Moses. And as you can see, there are 5 of them. They're broken up into each separate book, or sometimes what we call the Torah, the written Torah. Now these particular ones, they have actually commentary by one of the scholars. His name was Rabbi Shlomo Itzhaki, or sometimes abbreviated as Rashi. And let me maybe open it up a little bit and show you a little bit how it goes. And as you can see there's a Hebrew text over here of the actual Torah right here, right? And then the English translation right to the side of it. And on the bottom is the commentary of Rashi. And also what this includes, not the English though, but only the Aramaic translation of the Torah. And let me show you right here. So this part over here is the Aramaic translation of the Torah, which was composed by Onkelos about 2,000 years ago, during the Roman occupation of the land of Israel. So that's the Chumash. Now, let's see what else I should show. Now, here's another interesting books that I really like. This is called Me'am Lo'ez. And it's also available in English. And what it is basically the whole Torah, but this is not, I don't have the full set. There's probably 30 more books that are supposed to come in this set. But basically what this is the whole Torah, but not just with commentaries, but with also different Midrashim. And when I say Midrashim, it's different stories that were passed down to the Jewish people by tradition from their ancestors, from generation to generations. And there are certain stories that, happened and they were passed down in the form of a Midrash. And now Midrash, there is a separate book called Midrash, but what this author did, he lived, I think, around 300 years ago, maybe in Turkey. He compiled all the Midrashim from different books and organize them by chapters of the Torah, so that you read the portion in the Torah, and you can right away read the different midrashim that are talking about that particular part of the Torah, and therefore you get a bigger picture of what actually happened in the story when you read the Torah. Now this is what we call the Tanakh right here. It's probably one of the most, after the Torah itself, it's probably one of the most important books we have. And the Tanakh is basically, there's the 5 books of Moses. Let me, let's see, the best way to set it maybe over here, so you can see. So this includes the first 5 books of Moses, which I showed you over here, right, this part, but without the commentaries. It's just plain text, and it's both in English and Hebrew. And then after the 5 books of Moses, let me show you where it ends. So here's where the 5 books of Moses actually end. So this over here is where the 5 books of Moses end, and the rest of it is what we call the Nach. The Nach is other books written by other prophets that came after Moses. For example, we had prophet Isaiah, Jeremiah, peace be upon them all. We had prophet Avadia, who, by the way, was not Jewish by birth, and then he converted to Judaism. He was actually from the nation of Edom. So there's a book of Avadia. He was a prophet. He prophesied about of what's going to happen to Edom in the end of days. And all this basically is other prophets that came after Moses. And it's interesting, not many people realize that the 5 books of Moses is just this small. This is the Torah. This is what we call the Torah, the Chumash. And the rest of it is written by other prophets. So this was written by Moses, the 5 books, the Chumash, or the Torah, what we call. And the rest of it was written by all the different other prophets. Last one of them being, I think, Malachi, if I'm not mistaken. Peace be upon him. So this is the Tanakh. Now this is also interesting. This is we call in Hebrew Ein Yaakov, and what it is that we have what many of you have heard, the Talmud. Now the Talmud, I don't have a set here, which I can show you. I just have actually one volume over here on top. I can show you. This is what we call the Talmud. The Talmud is also the oral Torah, which we believe was passed down from Moses, peace be upon him, and on, to his students, their students, and it was passed down from generation to generation orally. It was passed down from father to son, from teacher to student orally, and the Jews knew this from tradition. But then at one time, this happened about maybe 1300 years after Moses. What happened is when the Jews got exiled by the Romans, the Jews decided, the rabbis of that generation decided to write it all down, just to make sure that it's not going to get forgotten, since Jews are now in exile and they're not communicating with each other so regularly. So the rabbis decided to write it down, and they wrote it down. First it was called a Mishnah, then commentaries were added to it, and it became known as the Talmud. And this is the Talmud, and there's actually like maybe 30 volumes of these that are actually, usually if you have the whole set, it's going to fill your whole bookcase of the Talmud. So the Talmud, it's most of it is maybe like 90%, I would say, is law. It discusses law, different, aspects of the law. It's more like a legal book. But within the Talmud, sometimes there's also stories, different stories about what happened with Moses that are not written in the actual Torah. And not just with Moses, all the different stories what happened with Abraham, for example, with Moses, peace be upon them, and sometimes even later generations, but 90% of it is law. And so what this author did, which I showed you, the Ein Yaakov, he took all the stories from the Talmud and compiled them in one book, so that if somebody, for example, wants to just read the stories and not go through the different laws and stuff, he could take out this book and read the stories from the Talmud. And let's see what else I want to mention. Anything particular? Oh, this is an interesting book too, the Kuzari. The Kuzari is a book which was authored by Yehuda Levi, Rabbi Yehuda Levi. He was actually a poet as well as an author, a sage, a scholar. And what he wrote is that during his time there was the kingdom of the Khazars, as many of you have heard. And in this kingdom, some of the the king himself and his relatives, his closest relatives, converted to Judaism. This was during the Khazarian kingdom, which was, I think, about 1,000 years ago. And so this book is basically a story of what convinced the king of the Khazars, his name was Bulam, I think, what convinced him that Judaism is the correct religion. And this book is like in the form of a discussion between the king and the Jewish rabbi. The sorts of questions the king would ask, and what the rabbi would reply. So this is like a question and answer kind of a book of a discussion of what convinced the king to accept Judaism. So this is the book of Kuzari, and it's also again in English, available in English. Originally, I think it was written actually in Arabic, but ever since it's been translated to Hebrew and English and other languages as well. And another book I want to talk, this is actually a really nice book, which I like. It's a 4,000-year Jewish history. So it starts all the way from the beginning, and it's not like a secular book where, there could be some heretical ideas. It's actually a religious book, but a historical book as well. And what I like about this, it has, pictures, and it has different archaeological photographs about certain things, and it's actually a really interesting book to read. It's like a really relaxing type of a book to read. You read it, you know the history, and you get inspired. The Jewish history itself is inspiring. From the fact that, for the last, 3,000 years after we got the Torah, the whole, pretty much, many nations tried to destroy the Jewish people and put an end to the existence of the Jewish people, and yet the Jewish people survived. Thank God. Blessed is the Lord. And so just reading the Jewish history of what they've been through, and yet, they haven't assimilated, and they haven't, been destroyed completely. They still exist. This is, in my opinion, this is in itself an inspiration. Just by learning Jewish history is already inspiring, because you see the hand of God, how, it controlled the fate of the Jewish people. Yes, we did get punished, obviously, for the bad things that we did. But the fact is, what the Torah promises us in the Torah, what God is promising to us is that He will never destroy us. There's actually a phrase God uses. He says that even in the exile and after all the sins that they did, God talks about the Jewish people. He says, they will not be disgusting enough for me in order to destroy them. This is what God promises us in the Torah. And reading the Jewish history, you see how actually that came to be. That no matter how much people tried, the Jewish people did not get destroyed. And I think that's pretty much it. There's obviously many more books, but it's going to be hard to discuss each one of them. Oh, maybe one more set I will discuss. Now, this is the book. This is called the 39 Melachot. This is 4-volume set in English. And what this book does, these 4 books do, is that this one also included. It's just different color. But what these do is discusses in detail all the laws of the Sabbath. So, for example, what we are not allowed to do on the Sabbath, what we are allowed to do. And as you can see, there's 4 volumes, a lot of details, because Sabbath is really detailed. Got a person, in order to observe the Sabbath correctly, there's a lot to know. And so this is what this book does. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video, and thank you for watching once again.